Hello, everyone.
There you go.
Welcome back to another episode of Lunch with People Purpose Place, and we're excited to have some extra people along today, so that's awesome. Today we're lucky enough to be having a conversation, and I suppose we've been calling these ideally difficult conversations, and I think this is actually one of those difficult conversations which needs to be had, because quite often the discussion around housing is, we constantly talk about being talked about about a product and a thing and all of those sorts of stuff, accommodation, but we don't ever talk about the human experience of housing and what that can actually be like for people going through that. So we're excited to have Jenny Sater on today to have a really in-depth conversation about her situation. Hello, welcome aboard. And also to the rest of the three amigos, Christine and Rowan, how are you?
Doing great. Glad to be back on, and glad to have Jenny here.
Absolutely. I noticed a bit of a spring in your step there, actually, Christine.
I'm getting better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
My
awesome.
health is going up. You watch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we might as well jump right in. And obviously, one of the first things we do with this process is really try and model some of the toolbox that we have in place. And I think we've defaulted back to the tried and true checking question, but I still think it works really well. So what do I need to leave aside to be fully present for this meeting? Someone want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I think that, I've really been focused for several podcasts on just trying to keep my central nervous system in a state of parasympathetic non-arousal.
Yes.
What I'm feeling right now is that just having a new person, Jenny, who I love to be with and love to talk to, she's not difficult, she's a lovely friend. So
just give her the $50 note afterwards. Okay?
Yeah, exactly. But the fact is that I'm still in sympathetic state just because there's another person here. And somehow I need to stay with myself. So what I want to put on the table is that a more sympathetic, more excited central nervous system. I want to just be able to put that on the table and leave it there and calm myself and stay in parasympathetic mode.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a little more than 30 seconds, but.
Jenny, did you want to go next? If you feel comfortable.
I wasn't too sure where to go, but on that level as well, through this whole experience that we're going to talk about shortly, I found myself in my daughter's house. I was angry as, just pissed off, every nerve, it's just everything just tight, just fight. And I did a little room session on the table, and everything that came out led to me being gentle. I need to be gentle, go through all of this and just be gentle. And it just changed my whole perspective about how I was going to handle all of the next 2 years. And it works every time. And that's what I'm doing now.
Beautiful.
That's
being
gentle
on me.
Can you put some runes out for me?
Yeah. Being gentle on yourself.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Projects onto
it is
everything.
absolutely beautiful. And I mean, it's funny how these things roll out. We don't want to get distracted, but it's interesting how people find a way to manage stuff, right? And one of the things we have said is that you need to be human as an individual before you can actually be human as a group. And what you've just modeled is something as a perfect tool for you to find a way to, how do I become human in amongst what would be an immune person, immune experience you've gone through. So, Rowan, what do you have to put aside?
Yeah, I guess I appreciate these meetings and this time, and I'm very conscious that the busyness of doing things in the background needs to be set aside so I can be present for now. Really appreciate your check-in there, Jenny, as a reminder about the human side of being present and here and now.
Absolutely.
And one technique for making yourself present, which was beautiful to be demonstrating that.
Absolutely. And I think all of these things can go in the toolkit, can't they? Because everyone will have their own way. And I think for me, I have in the last probably week or so been conscious of me not being present. So I think this morning when I went and did my mindfulness, I sort of was conscious of my last week. I had been distracted for whatever reason. And this week I'm going to try a lot harder to be more present with those experiences and to feel into some of that stuff that we go through. So I enjoy the check-in questions because it makes me rethink about some of that stuff. So I'll probably pass a fair amount of this over to Christine and Jenny to have a chat about, but there was just two sort of introductory questions that I thought I might just prompt some information, and these are ones I've probably just added into the agenda. So Jenny's not going to have notes specifically for these ones, but ultimately I just wanted to have a bit of a backstory so that when people understand exactly what we're talking about, there's two questions, which is, what is your general story or what was your general journey up until the point where you had this major housing pivotal moment? And then just a 2-second or 30-second explanation of what went completely pear-shaped with your housing situation. So in the first instance, just a little bit of your backstory. Did you grow up in the area, or did you grow up somewhere else? Or
this backstory is quite dark, but we won't delve too far into that.
Yeah.
So I moved to the Tablelands with my two children from Victoria. Yep. I packed up, I had a farm down there where I milked goats and anyway, so I packed up the kids, the cat, the coffee, the dog, the station wagon and everything to do us for 6 months. So I came up here because my parents were here. And 32 years later, I'm still here.
Wowzers.
I went back 10 years later and packed everything up and just turned around and came straight back.
Yeah, right. And did you grow up? So where did you grow up, in Victoria or in the Tablelands?
I grew up in New South Wales in the Junee. So I was, my father was a shunter on the railway and mum was a stay-at-home mum, and my grandparents, who I idolised, ran a big farm where we spent most of our time, and we had a huge family.
That's awesome.
We don't now, but we did have lots of cousins and kids and farming.
Yeah. I have a bit of a similar story. My mother is the youngest of a really large family, and Roman Catholic dairy farmers, and that extended family we all sort of had, which now is we don't know all the chemicals and stuff they're all using on those farms and the impact on everyone around them. But it's good to grow up in that extended family environment, isn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic, and to see, to collect the eggs and make the jam and pick the fruit and get to separate the cream and, hang out with your grandparents, who were very old when I was little. My dad was the youngest of 9 as well. Yeah. I also saw the hard part of it, the harshness of that woman who raised 9 kids and did everything herself, and the gentleness as well. It was great. When you look back on it.
It is interesting because I find that I have that question about, I think they call people of that era the great era or something along those lines, because they've gone through the difficult experiences of the Great Depression, but they've somehow remained human in amongst that. But I think there was a feeling that there was a bit of a polarization there, wasn't there? They had to be hard, but in the same instance, how do they remain soft coming from such harsh times, so it's different how you look back on it with different lenses.
Yeah, and I always, because I was the oldest of 3 children, so I was the one who was responsible for the kids no matter where we were. And my grandfather adored me. I'm sure my grandmother did as well, but as much time as I spent with her in the kitchen learning things, she was the best tea towel flicker I've ever come across in my face. I spent more time dodging that tea towel. But I loved her intensely, and they taught us a lot. Survival.
Yeah.
Survival of the tea towel flick.
Yeah. It's dangerous as.
That's why American kids are so unruly. We didn't have tea towels growing up.
Well, they can leave a mark too. I mean, I think we actually got to the point where they were actually banned in our house. Like we got to a point where you can leave a real mark with one if you know what you're doing. So, and an expert ninja like a grandmother would be able to leave a serious mark, I suggest. Jumping forward to probably then I'll let you and Christine have a conversation after that. If I can just have so you're moving along, you're living your life, and then there's a housing moment for you which changes everything overnight. What was that housing moment that changed your life?
So I bought a little house in Herberton, which I consequently, through more devastation in life, ended up giving it to the bank through threats and what have you. So I lost my little house, and that's when we discussed earlier on, I had this little place at the caravan park. So moving into that, it was a saviour. There was always this little contentious thing in the background that we may have to move out of the caravan park.
You tenants of the caravan.
Yeah, it could be. Down the track, it could be. But we continued on and formed a committee in the caravan park and had meetings with council. And when I thought things weren't fair, we had meetings with council and had meetings with council. And most of the time we won. We had things changed to suit the residents because we put up a good enough fight argument to say that, hey, we are here, these are the visitors, it's got to be two different things. We live here. So the first time I found out about the rumour, the eviction rumour was from a meeting that we weren't informed about. So it came secondhand. So I followed up straight away, which led to our first meeting with council, which came 24 hours beforehand, which then they wanted us all together. This is the permanents and the holiday makers. So I refused to do that with everybody else. I said, I'm not attending that meeting with everybody else. We are all individual people. We have individual stories, and we have individual needs. So we managed to get a group of the permanents have a meeting together, a few that were closest to myself and my daughter, and the other holiday makers had theirs individually. To be told straight up that this is what was going to happen without any negotiation whatsoever.
Oh, right. They had negotiated up to that point, but at that point it became their dogmatic decision, autocratic decision.
They had no negotiation whatsoever with us at all.
But previous to that, with your grievances or your changes of rules, they had negotiated, but not about your presence there.
That's right.
And I just have to interrupt very briefly to point out that this is the most amazing peninsula that juts out into Lake Tinaroo, which is an enormous, beautiful man-made lake, but absolutely enormous. And they had the most beautiful location right there on the waterfront. And it was just a splendid, splendid, splendid location, not far from town, but in this absolutely stunning backdrop with walking trails and lots of.
And how long had you resided there, Jenny?
Sorry?
How long had you lived at this before this meeting?
13 years. I owned it for 18 years, I think, in the end, but I lived there for 13 years.
So you'd been a 13-year resident, then with no notice, you hear a rumour, and then you make a meeting request the next day, and all the 13 years of negotiation and discussion backwards and forward had changed to this is the way it's going to be. There was no negotiation.
No, money and the future of the peninsula came first, not the people that had cared and shared, and there was no human factor.
And manage the facility. I'd imagine as permanent residents over that period of time, there's a level of upkeep and community goodwill generated by your presence and maintenance and neighbourhood tending to the wildlife and the nature, that I guess is not a number on a spreadsheet.
No, well, we had a really lovely little community there. Everybody looked out for everyone else. And even when the holiday makers came in, we sort of tended to pull their weeds and kept an eye on their places. And then when they came, the people that had been there for a long time, you got together, had a glass of wine on a Friday night and, told a few yarns. But we had a beautiful community. And people that had come there for 13 years, the time that I was there, would come back and say hello, and we'd swap stories and cuttings and have a cup of tea.
Yes. But a lot of the visiting people would have been repeat visitors with some sense of community returning to their Lake Tinaroo Peninsula.
Correct.
Yeah, and people had actually noticed the progress that my daughter and I had done, because we did quite a bit of renovation and had beautiful gardens. And they were really pretty. People actually used to come and knock on the door to ask if they could come and have a look.
Yeah.
Because they were just sheds and caravans, but they were really pretty.
We should have given Colby a photo, because it was the most charming little fairy garden that Jenny had put together. Just charming, absolutely, and in this beautiful setting. And then bang, you just got you had the guillotine shown to you. You're out. And how did that feel? I mean, in that first moment, how did that news hit you? Because you'd had some glimmer that was a possibility, but it came as a very knife edge event, didn't it?
I've actually made some notes here, which I'll refer to. I was really angry. I was really hurt. I just could not believe that these absolute people and I did vote for that man. Mm-hmm. No, I voted for him. I'm a good citizen. I just, or try to be. I just couldn't believe it. I was so angry. But I was more angry in the lack of care for the human being. Yeah, and we as people and part of our wider community. And then I talk about the people that used to come and visit us from the wider community. It took a long time for it to actually sink in. And I started the negotiation. Well, I started ringing the newspapers, pardon me, ringing the radio, getting in contact with the RTA, which led me to Q-Star. I learnt a lot through this whole process, by the way, which I've been able to help other people with that have been in a similar situation. But initially I was so angry, and then I just realised that this anger was just starting to tear me apart. I was just like, this is not good. I've got to do something about this. I can't go forward, like a bull at a gate. I've got to work out another way. What I said before about calming myself down, believing in myself, respecting myself, being gentle on myself so that I could project that gentleness to other people who were absolute, I'd love to swear through this, but I can't, who were not showing the whole thing. But it also gave me a strength to stick up for myself as well, and to stand strong in my quietness, in myself, and not take their shit, and not and everything that they put forward, every hoop that they put forward, and there was many of them, it gave me the strength to go through and just go, okay, bring it on, give me another thing, and I'll just, we're just going to keep it up until we just give it our best. And it was really good for me as well, because I was able to help the other people.
Because you'd solidified your inner strength, and because you'd worked through that anger and come to a really powerful place. And
attend the meetings and be the spokesperson and be spokesperson,
and
for
still
those
not
people
get bent out of shape.
How many permanent residents were there?
In the end, there were 6 of us.
Yep.
Hang on, 2, 4.
That's enough.
Yeah, there were 6 of us. And there were 13 residents all up that were pulled down and carted off.
Yeah.
Residences, buildings.
Yeah. So how did you coped with your feelings of anger, but how did you cope with your feelings of loss and disruption, because you were out of control. They were in control.
Yeah, I
That's
think
really a hard one.
I've actually just come to terms with it now.
Right.
Now, I mean, 2 years later, actually, it's longer than that. Now I'm really thinking about how I can move forward, where I can go next, how I can have my own space. Like I was able to buy that little house that I had. So I believe that that is a possibility for myself again. So I can have somewhere for my grandchildren to come, so my daughter can be safe. My elder daughter will have somewhere to be, but mostly just to prove that I can do it, you know. So what was the question again?
It doesn't really matter. But the question was, how did you cope with the feeling of loss and despair or disruption?
It's taken 2 years, you know, by the sounds of it, 2 years.
It's one
years
thing
of
to
healing.
Yeah, it's one thing to deal with anger, but it's another thing to deal with the grief of losing a place or a tenancy or a person or an animal.
Well, when I say I've just come to terms with it now, it's because I've only just stopped, and I've only just stopped because I broke my patella and I had to stop. So I had to think about, okay, what are you going to do? You need to recreate yourself. You need to be working on something else. But before then, it was trying to find somewhere to store all of our belongings, not only my own, but my daughter's, and just, you know, telling these guys that there is nowhere on the table. There's not only is there nowhere to live, there's nowhere to store anything. So trying to work through all of that, and then months of working through my daughter's stuff, moving it from point A to point B, my own. That went on for months and months. And then I did actually get a job with a little cottage out at, well, anyway, and that lasted for 6 months. So then my sister was unwell and has since passed away. So my time was spent going through that and then grieving, worrying about my eldest daughter, helping my younger kids move from the Gold Coast to Cairns. And like I said, there has been no time to stop until the universe said, you need to break your knee so you can sit down, shut up and have a bit of a think.
And it's actually something we discuss.
What else can you do?
Yeah, what else do you do?
Yeah, and it's something we actually talk about a lot. You know, we don't have any quantifiable time. You know, we've always talked about the duress and the stress that's created by the disturbance around housing. But you've really quantified it into something that's quite tangible, which is you just went into emergency mode for the sake of surviving. And 2 years later, you've had enough time to mentally process that. So that's quite a lot of time. And I don't think, there's all these numbers out there about who's on the verge of homelessness or who actually are homeless. And I doubt whether a very small percentage of those people would have your level of resilience either. You know, obviously, do you think you've just been a resilient person your whole life, or did this grow because of this event?
I think when I think back at it, and I was talking to Christine the other day as well, and when I look at the lives of my own children and how they've dealt with situations in their lives, especially 2 of them, I think that resilience came from nowhere. They lost their father at, my eldest daughter we were married for 7 years. And so I fought, and it was one of those Victorian police shootings. It was actually the first one in the 80s. So going through that and then bringing up my children and the farm by myself and battling against that until I'm told you better just leave the Victorian police alone before you find yourself in trouble and leave the state. I decided to leave the state. And then just, trying to bring my kids up the best I can. They won't say that, but I know. But looking at their resilience, it has to come from me because I was the only one. And my youngest daughter, who's 32, saying to me the other day, Mama, just Scorpio women are the strongest women in the zodiacs. I thought it's got a little bit more to do with your star signs. But I've been very resilient. But I'm a fighter, so it's just it's fight rather than run away.
Yeah. But that's amazing that you've had to build. You know, you've built that resilience along that journey. But also, I suppose, how many people out there don't have that resilience, and how many people in the next generation maybe don't have parents who've set that role model is another question, which, you wonder about. Like, we've got a problem now, but you're resilient. You've done an amazing and immense job to not only survive, but to also bring up children in that environment. But how many people in the next generation maybe don't have that resilience, I wonder.
It's a bit of a worry.
It is a worry.
I've got a farming background myself, and I wonder at the number of people that farms have become larger and larger, employing fewer and fewer people. So as a portion of our population, I think most people are quite disconnected from our food production altogether. So I think the novelty of visiting a sunflower farm to take an Instagram photo is about most people's connection with farming today. And how do I milk a flower to get sunflower oil is sort of the level of food production.
What they don't know is the depth of the roots of the sunflower. What they don't know is that a sunflower will move away from you if you're going to pick it. The sunflower knows. What they don't know is all the byproducts that come from the sunflower. It's not just a big happy face that you can put yours against. There's so much more to it. It's resilient.
Do they actually move away from you?
Didn't you read The Secret Life of Plants when you were smoking hooter as a young kid?
So we don't know that, but we
That's true. It's really true. They wire them up.
There you do.
No, but what I'm saying is there's a lot more behind growing a plant or going out and having a garden. There's so much more. Yes.
Well, and for people who grow up,
experience.
people who grow up on farms not only have healthy food, but they get nature and they get an education. Whether the grandparents are doting or the parents are doting, just watching your parents and grandparents survive on a farm, I think, Rowan, you've also had that experience. It is hugely resilience providing, because you see the cycles and you see what struggles, and you see other people saying, "Oh, isn't this wonderful because of this and that," but they don't see the hard work. But you, as a child of a farm, have seen that hard work. And Rowan, wouldn't that have been your experience as well, that you really understood things in a different way than non-farming kids?
You've seen the product of the hard work
That's
as well.
That's it.
And understanding that this too will pass. So we have a drought season or a crappy season or an event.
Yes.
But it passes. A flood deposits all this fertile micronutrients on your floodplains that will produce awesome crops in future cycles. Right now, it's devastating, but it has all these flow-on effects. This drought is terrible and has all this impact, but it will pass.
I also understand that statement about this too shall pass was originally, in its original thinking, was actually about good times. So, I mean, I think one of the things you do learn is, don't start, make hay while the sun shines. All of those things fit into that same statement. Is that I think in the farming experience, you also learn that while the harvest is great, that will pass, and you'll go back to having to work through those incredibly difficult times to come out the other side. So.
I found it a very humbling life that you can do all of this amazing stuff. So you can research or do hard work or put in effort, and it can amount to nothing, or it can amount to a modest season, or it can be an exceptional season with factors that you
cannot control.
Nature is an incredible leveler.
Actually, I noticed another question there specifically about how you were treated during the negotiation, and I also wondered, do you feel like because of the fact you were purely renting, that they, or what we class as long-term leasing, that they took advantage of that? Like, do you think they saw that you as easy pushovers and you don't really have any controls and that sort of stuff? Do you think they saw that as an easy path to push you around?
Well, we were continually reminded that we don't own the ground that our houses sit on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your ground. You may have
Yeah.
paid us $60,000 in the last, few years, but you
Leasing.
don't own the ground.
Yeah.
So
Our decision when you go.
you don't have the leg to stand on, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you found that in the long run, this was empowering because you're feeling stronger and you stood up for yourself. But there must have been some terribly disempowering moments.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah.
It went on for so long. And had we have just gone, okay, see you later, it wouldn't have gone on for so long.
No,
But,
if you hadn't fought.
Yeah,
But you
and
fought.
we fought. No, it was terrible. But the most terrible thing was to see that I own this. I put all of my money into this. It's not even a year old. I had intended to do this, get it up to, well, it was at the point where both my daughter and I were considering selling. A few people had sold prior, and that's where we're at. And then for this to happen and just go, okay, and then.
So your entire capital investment
Everything.
disappeared.
Everything.
Totally.
Just
All
gone.
your effort, all of your capital investment.
and the bastards just took it.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no thought of compensation. We engaged a solicitor, the whole lot of us, invested $500 each, to have, I think we had about 10 days with him to be told that, no, sorry, mate, we can't do anything for you.
Really?
Yeah, so that
no
was
compensation. You got no compensation
whatsoever. To be told by, this is what I did do. I got in contact with the Cairns Legal Centre because they don't have any money, so it's free. So 2 years down the track, and I have actually put in something against that. What they're doing is against human rights. So that's in the pipeline somewhere, because I believe that what they did is against human rights.
So it's a suit against the council.
Oh, it works out, Christina. The only thing we're going to get from council is maybe a letter of apology. But
Right.
I was thinking that even without a letter of apology, that starts a process for other people who are that may be in future in the same situation as we have. And because I got something from the council, it may be something to take to the solicitor later on and go, hey, you guys have just said that you've done the wrong thing, so maybe I can get some compensation.
How much do they sell the site for? Do they sell the site, and how much do they get for it?
No, this was all about, there was lots and lots of stories going on, but it was all about upgrading the park, getting rid of the ugly houses, mowing down all the trees and all the shrubs and all of the things that bring in the wildlife and all the things that make the caravan park beautiful, getting rid of all that so that you've got more sites and you make more money.
Yeah, right.
Well, they commercialized. They just simply said, this is not commercial and we aren't making any money on it. And this is a very valuable site. I mean, it's stunningly beautiful. And so they did what developers do, and they just knocked down all the trees, knocked down all the little charming little houses because they weren't good enough. They weren't fancy enough. They weren't modern enough. They
weren't paying enough money.
You weren't paying enough money, and they were going to keep the, maybe it was too ratty looking for the tourists to turn up and think they were coming to a high class experience. I don't know what they were thinking, but those kind of thoughts. But it was all about commercializing a commercializable, beautiful property that was underperforming in terms of return on investment for the council.
Yeah.
You can understand their point of view completely.
Oh.
Yeah,
But I mean, it totally makes sense. But the question is, don't you have to compensate people for some kind of, and it just seems.
And the council get some goodwill and some benefit of having an engaged local community. So if you go on scorched earth this parcel of land and disengage your local community, you lose goodwill and reputation by doing that. And
Absolutely.
that's nigh impossible to put a dollar figure on it. And accountants will tell you it's worth nothing, but clearly it's worth something.
Did you lose faith in the political system by going through this? Have you
Oh,
lost?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I managed to get myself into the first meeting up at Ravenshoe for that beginning of that year, and stood up in front of everybody and just
Council meeting.
told my story, and a few other people came up to tell their story. And that's what I said. Where's the human factor in this? There's none. There's none. And that was my main concern, that I did not give a shit about any of us.
And this is in the middle of a housing crisis, because had this happened 5 years ago, all of us would have been less aware of the crunch in housing. But hey, Far North Queensland has like a 0.1% open occupancy. You can't find a place to live here. We're really in the middle of a housing crunch. And certainly all the things we've talked about, homing as opposed to housing. Well, unless you got a house, you can't make a home. And so, you would think that they might have reacted differently because of the historical circumstances, but they didn't.
And, interestingly enough, not one of our local councillor, our local representative for the Yungaburra area, did not approach me once. A friend of mine, Dr. Geraldine Mallison, I asked her if she wouldn't mind meeting with him. I couldn't stand the look of him. I just would not be in the same room as him. That's when I was really, really angry. I thought, I can't do this, because I just want to be really nasty and calling horrible names, which will get me nowhere. So she had a meeting with him, and he never, even after that, not once, came to say, how we're going, do you need any assistance? I ran into his wife at our local folk festival, which I'm involved in, and he was up on the stage welcoming everybody. I didn't know it was his wife, and she said, oh, you're Jenny from the caravan park. I went, oh yeah, who are you? Blah, blah, that's my husband up there. Yeah, I just thought, wow, I might just stay here and he might come down and I might just bail him up. But I didn't. I thought I just went, nah, can't do it. But the fact is, he never ever came anywhere near us.
So
I'd seen him walking his dog.
Yeah. So you felt like you were treated as another consumable. That is to say, you weren't a person. Your feelings were not to be
transaction. Yeah.
It was just an objective transaction.
We were just a wasted space.
Oh dear. And
by way of equal incompetence comparison, so that you don't feel perhaps it's all on you, Jenny, I have been having similar conversations here in southeast Queensland in the Brisbane local council area with a very engaged, who is an exception in political leadership, local councillor. And he pointed out an example of a house that was owned by public funds. It might have been held by one of the departments, so Department of Rail or Department of Transport or Department of Housing, government departments that own quite a few public houses around, publicly funded houses. And this councillor pointed out that there was this Department of, I'm not sure I'm exactly correct, Department of Railways housing is vacant. And so the Department of Railways looked at it and said, oh, you're right, it is. And it's right next to the train station. We'll bulldoze it and make car parking there. And that's what they did. So there just isn't the political comprehension of what these assets could be used for and what the benefit is from a human perspective. They've now got 18 more car parks. That was their great outcome.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I looked at the RTA rules and regulations really, really closely, and there was a clause in there that said if there was room on the land, where they called them removable dwellings, and I can't remember the numbers that they had pinpointed to them, but if there was a space on the land where these dwellings sit, and the person who owns the land is willing to keep that person on the land, then at their expense, they would help them move. So there was plenty of room for us, but they were not interested at all in helping us. So that was an actual clause through the RTA. And then again, I was coming up the coast and I called into a little caravan park where my aunt and uncle were, and noticed that there were these little dwellings in the middle of a very small caravan park. It was the Livingston Council. So I spoke to the managers there, and I also rang the Livingston Council when I got back. And they were allowed to stay there. There's just a certain amount of them, and because through the goodwill of the Livingston Council,
There you are.
they were allowed to stay there.
Yeah,
Nobody else could come in but these people that were there. So
originally.
they worked out that they could have a certain amount of dwellings in a certain amount of space. So I mean,
and even the fundamental. So we work in a construction space, and we understand that if we have a space and it's underperforming, there are ways to make it perform, which might involve landscaping, might involve beautification projects, might involve any number of other things, with your end goal in mind, that we want a greater yield, we want a greater whatever, we want a greater whatever. The scorched earth policy that is favoured by bureaucrats who want simple, clean answers is often not the best yield improvement or amenity improvement or outcome, but it is the simplest to say, get a D9 bulldozer, run that over the top, and then chop it up in smaller pieces.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy, but it is interesting that you found this example of a humane treatment of some permanent residents, and you've been the object of some very inhumane treatment. And the question is, how could this? Yeah, not. I mean, there's no point in asking ourselves the question now. How could it have been different? But how? I mean, this has really changed your situation. How did you work your way out of this?
Well, as we're sitting here talking about this, and things are sort of coming to the surface again, I feel all of those feelings again are coming flooding through, because it was a grievance. You know, we have things in our lives along the way too. Like my brother committed suicide at that caravan park. My mother and my father are passed it through all of this stuff as well.
Right.
And it's just a shit story, excuse the French, but I said it's a bit dark, but fighting through. My daughter's partner was killed in a car accident as we were going through this. So none of these human factors were considered, even when they were brought to the foreground to say, listen, can you just give us some time? They did actually give us a little bit more time. God bless them. But it was a fight to get to that point. They wanted proof of my daughter's. They wanted the death certificate of my daughter's. They were one of the. I'm getting a bit upset. That was one of the hoops that they wanted us to jump through. I mean, she couldn't do that. She couldn't deal with any of it. And why in the hell would you put people to relive stuff? You know, to relive
suicide. Yeah. That's just horrible.
You know, it was just, as I say, there was no human factor in it whatsoever. There was no humanity, none. It just was all about just
dollars.
Yeah, just get out. We'll deal with
it. When you said earlier on today that it could certainly be a book, I think it'd almost be one that most people would not believe, right? Like some of the experiences you've gone through, you would literally say, no, surely that can't be the case. They can't have done that, but you've lived it, you know. Yeah.
I kept all the paperwork.
And I think this is the concern for a lot of people is like if you give control to bureaucrats who essentially have no humanity, then everything is just a transaction, right? It's just that whole, well, you know, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. Oh, I've got a form to fill out here. Hey, you know, well, how did they die and can you give me the death certificate? I mean, that's just completely removing a human from the conversation, which is, you know, yeah, just it's mind-boggling that you've had to go through that experience, but there it is, you know, like that's.
And then to wait for their response, there was no response. I'm just writing back saying, well, okay, well, you promised this if we did this, but it never came through. And then when I brought it forward and tried to say, okay, well, you said you were going to give us more time, or We prove our hardships or prove the fact that we've signed up for government housing. That there was so
made all these efforts.
We've done it all.
Yeah.
So what now? Are you going to give us another 6 months? Are you going to reconsider? Are you going to believe that Sorry.
Yeah.
Are you going to believe that our stories are true? Now, how much more narrating do we have to do to prove our point?
Yeah.
It was very harsh.
Yes, and I can imagine how terrible that felt. But once you were out, how did you then? I mean, we don't have a lot of time left in an hour. We can always go on a little bit, but just before we close this time, and we can always have you come back and talk about this more, because I think this is a really, really important story. How has this worked out for you, and where are you now, and where are you moving forward to? Okay. With housing in particular.
All right, so I loved the little cottage where I was first up, and that was really because I moved to it. This where I had this job, and that was really because of my community connections that came up.
Right.
The people that I'm sharing with now are friends, male friends. One of them, I don't know if he's my friend too much anymore because he's a grouchy old bugger, but I'm very grateful for the fact that they finally found a house, because the fellow that was doing all of the hunting had applied for 40 houses in the Atherton Tableland area, 40, and missed out on all of them. And just lucky enough that he found this private advertisement for the house we're in now, at a reasonable rent for the three of us. I couldn't see any single mum trying to do it, or an unworking couple, but for the three of us. And despite the difficulties, and despite again looking at myself and saying, well, am I reacting to his reactions, and working on yourself all the time, it's quite comfortable. I have my own room. It's a big house, and I don't have a great deal. I have a little veggie garden out the front, out the side, which I can hang out. I work. Well, I haven't been working of late. But for now, it suits me out of necessity.
Yeah, and that is really a necessity choice, isn't it? It's one of those things you're sort of being forced into rather than selected to some extent.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
And so, how is this is to us? This is really interesting, because, of course, what we're trying to do is find 5 people who are willing to try to work with each other and on each other in order to make agreements to live together and to share. And how much sharing needs to be done or wants to be done is a really big question. How are you finding going from your own individual little house to sharing with 2 others when at an age when most of us are not going back to sharing, but most of us are being part of smaller and smaller household in sometimes a very big house?
Again, it comes down to the people you're living with. That's the big question, isn't it? The people that you're sharing with. When I did break my knee, I had the house to myself for a month and a half. It was heaven, broken knee in heaven.
Your own house to have a broken knee in.
And have your own space. And then one came back, and he's the dominant one. He's the one that won't listen to anything. And then, anyway, so I was away on Friday night from the house for the first time in a long time. I woke up in the morning thinking, I woke up through the night thinking, I'm not thinking about the other people in the house. I'm not worrying that my presence here or my friend snoring is going to bother the person in the next room. I'm not worrying about having to get up before 8:30 so that I can go and do my bathroom and get all my washing and everything done beforehand. I feel at ease. I'm relaxed. So being in the house, really, I didn't realize until I was away from it, I'm not relaxed.
Right.
No, and I think that's a very good point. Very good point.
If I care about people, then maybe that would be different. But I do care about people and other people's space, other people's feeling. So I'm not comfortable in that respect. I'm always on guard.
And I think some of that might be due to the fact that being forced together out of necessity doesn't allow you the space to have correct rules and to enter on the same playing field and to work through. And also, I'd imagine the house is a traditional house, right? So literally, to some extent, there's some things you can't get around feeling awkward with, depending on how many bathrooms there are or how you collide with each other at different parts of the home. Would that be fair? Or
Yeah, that's fair.
And and what you call the kitchen dance.
The kitchen dance.
Well, it depends on how much space there is and how many people there are, and who likes to cook and who hates to cook, and who manages the kitchen how. But
we've got that worked out. Yeah. Sorry.
But isn't that interesting how you're sharing with people that you didn't actually intend to share with?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest problems is that all of the arrangements and the agreements that we're talking about putting together with the help of our toolkit, they've not been entered into. And it could be that out of the two housemates that you have, that one of them would never enter into those. The other one might, but what do you do if you're in a situation where you're having to share, but it's hard to have a discourse about it? It's hard to have a discussion.
Well, it's interesting there. One of the people, the guy who actually found the house, is very respected by the older man.
All right.
They're good friends. It's like son and.
That's good. Yeah.
So he can quite easily tell him where to go.
Right.
I've done it a couple of times and just walked away, but he can tell him where to go.
Yeah.
And then there's a follow-up.
Right.
I've tried to negotiate with the older man, and I can definitely see that at one stage in his life he was not a nice husband. Because it's very hard to have a conversation with him. But when the other guy,
you count?
Yeah,
count?
Exactly right.
You female, you count?
That's exactly. So
you have an opinion?
That's right.
How ridiculous.
And then when I came home the other day, because I actually got a little bit feisty and just gave it to him in a gentle way, when I came back, he was feeling sorry for himself. And I was
then you almost had to comfort him for you being.
I'm not doing that.
Good for you.
I'm not. But it's this whole negotiating thing. But when the other fellow comes back, he is. I'll say to him, we need to discuss things. We have a round table discussion.
Oh, you do.
We do.
Right.
We sit down and we
clear.
discuss things.
Yeah.
And things are worked out. And he's generally the person who says, "Okay, Sam, pull your head in. She's got as much rights as we do."
Right.
So it works out that way. But
right.
it's a bit of a bloody
journey. But as you said, Christine, I think probably there is a little bit of that challenge that you would have to have a house of grumpy old men to probably make that other situation work, because, as you said, if they can't form an agreement or you can't come to having a comfortable way to be conscious of those around you and be able to adjust, then it's always a bit difficult. I'm actually, I don't know, we might even run over time, but I think we're all comfortable with that anyway, because I'm still intrigued by a few of those elements. And one of the things I'm interested in is it sounds like you've immersed yourself in the community over time. What has been your work passions in this time while you've been up on the table, Anne? So what have you been doing with yourself from a work point of view?
I have this, I think that I'm amazing at being invisible.
Oh, really?
But I'm not.
All right.
Because I do things, whatever I do, I don't do it for someone to pat me on the back. I've never done that. You just got something to do, just go and do it. I get these wonderful ideas for arts
projects or
not
whatever.
All I have over the years, yes.
Yeah.
And running the childcare centres, what have you. There's a lot of people out there who know me. And there's a lot of kids who know me, which I forget that they know me until I go to the local pharmacy or the local bank or the local Telstra place, and somebody behind the counter says, "Hey," and then they remember the times that we had together.
Yeah.
So mostly my time has been working with kids. The parents come second, so the kids are first. But had lovely times with parents where I've found people to sew things, to make things, to help create backdrops and all sorts of stuff. So that's it's an extension of the community, of my community. I think I ran a daycare centre at the Yungaburra State School, after school and vacation care. We did everything that no one can do now.
Right. Right.
We had no rules or regulations. Well, we did, of course. There are plenty of rules and regulations around behaviour and what have you. But those kids had we created the most wonderful experiences for their children, and their parents backed us up.
Great.
And we went on the lake in the storm. One of the parents left the front boat over the other side of the lake because, we had fires where we made pottery and, the raku pottery in the ground. And the next day we had a barbecue first in a pit, and then we made pottery and put it in the ground. You couldn't have a fire pit in any childcare centre now.
Mm.
I suppose, and now that I'm working, I've got my little gardening thing, it's more of an escape, because I don't want to put up with the shit. I don't want to tick someone else's boxes and go by anybody else's rules. I'm quite happy talking to plants and seeing the odd snake. And it's a really nice place to contemplate.
But you have a very strong feeling for what you're contributing and to whom you are contributing, don't you? You have a strong sense of community. You have a strong sense of your own artistic creativity, your theatrical creativity, and that your care and your attention to other people and to the things that bring you joy are really what you contribute to a community, isn't that?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And at the moment,
it appears to me you're like that.
With my broken patella, trying to think of things that I can do in the next part of my life, the next journey in my life, all revolves around working with other people, working with people. But this time on my terms, things that what I would like to create within the community.
Beautiful.
I created a lovely at-home circus, involved the whole family project for COVID, where I had a couple of people. It started off with one boy in particular. I was doing their gardening, but I've known them for years. And their boy is, he has a few learning difficulties, but his IQ is up here.
Mm-hmm.
So he's homeschooled. And I asked them if they'd like to do a little circus project. I was thinking about how to do this project, so they were my pilots.
Oh, great.
So we involved an aunt came, the mother has a disability, father works hard, grandfather and grandfather are very supportive. And this kid had behavioural problems and didn't want to do anything that anybody else wanted him to do, just on his computer creating. He's a special kid. So what we did was I taught him to juggle. His aunt, who's a school teacher, came up from Cairns twice a week and was there as a family member to work with him. I taught him how to come on the stage, off the stage. They were putting a pool in, so we used all the cardboard and all the things that were there, all the recycling stuff, as our backdrop for the stage. My son's a painter, and I still had one of his drop sheets, so we did all the painting on the drop sheet. The drop sheet became our backdrop on the stage, and he picked the music. I showed him how to work things within the music. We spoke about costumes. He made his own costume. I got him to do invitations for all his friends and families, and the driveway and he performed in front of all of his friends with his auntie. He even called his mother up on stage. Cool. So this was circus at home. So I was because I don't have all of these skills, I could just envisage having these little community circuses at people's houses, and then everybody coming together for performance, and every individual household
brings their performance,
and then you create another little community. When we weren't able to have we were involved in it. So the brain doesn't turn off very often. Whether I put these things into position or most of my has been working with kids in my community, putting up with the parents of those children, and to this day still trying to work out how we can work within my community.
Right, and now you're often working with older people, and it's,
rewarding in itself.
it's an interesting thing, isn't it? That your whole care and humanity part of yourself is such an important aspect of your being.
Yeah, I never really thought about it that much. Actually, it wasn't giving me these great accolades. It's just what I do. It's just what I do.
But isn't this the perfect place to end this particular session? Because what we've seen is this really intimate portrait of who Jenny. I just feel like we have such a lively sense of who you are, and what a beautiful sense of what a contributor to the community you are, and how you've grown through these slaps in the face that in part the community has delivered. And I just think this is a beautiful story, and I think we have to have you come back again.
Can I finish it with something? Do you mind?
Oh, please.
The moment I know when I landed on my knee, I thought, fuck, here we go again. So it's another thing that I've got to work again. I had all these plans, and they've just come to a crashing straight away.
Yeah.
So I've got to work it all out again. Anyway, I did. I am.
You did, and you are. Brilliant.
Jenny, on behalf of all of us.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Fuck, I got to do it all again.
Oh, God. To replan the whole thing.
Yeah, it just was a big flash. Here we go again.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
On behalf of all of us, Jenny, I would love to say thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us.
Thank you.
I think anyone viewing this at a later point in time or thinking about our community's neighbourhood, yes, in my backyard, we are all much richer for your contribution and the kind of person that you are in our neighbourhoods and communities. And it's a tragedy that the leadership in your example, in your community, your politicians and bureaucrats have not supported you as a basic human right should. And I think the people purpose place process, hopefully we can help you as an example and more community-minded people like you. I was reflecting with our group that there's a tragedy in inner city Brisbane that the teachers who teach the young minds of Brisbane metropolitan city have to live outside of Brisbane metropolitan city and commute to and from because they're excluded from that community just by the housing market as it stands today. And all of us are much richer for a diverse range of people, and you're an inspiration to me personally.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
I
you very
found
much.
it a very inspirational hour.
Mm.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to bring things further.
Come back for
We'll
another
get you back.
Mm.
Yeah, we'll have to get you back at some other time to continue the story, because episodes 2, 3, and 4, of course, will be equally exciting to hear your journey.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Awesome.
Beautiful spot to finish.
Thanks,
Thank
Jen.
you. Thank you, Christine and Darren. And thank you very much, Jenny. That's brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest.